Great piece written by Helen Rosner, The Fight to Rein in Delivery Apps. The antitrust researcher Moe Tachik discusses New York's new laws and the future of Doordash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats. So let's dive straight in. Prior to the coronavirus pandemic, the business model of food delivery apps went largely unconsidered by the diners who relied on them for midday kale salads and late night taco feasts. Platforms such as Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub often charged restaurants commissions of up to 30% per order, and they were evasive about how and how much their couriers were compensated. But for most restaurants, delivery comprised only a fraction of total sales. Then the COVID-19 pandemic turned virtually all restaurants into take-out and delivery-only businesses, and the brutal economics of the delivery apps became a matter of life or death urgency for both restaurants selling food and the couriers delivering it. In April of last year, San Francisco became the first city to enact an emergency order to cap delivery app fees for restaurants at 15%. That prompted a cascade of similar legislation in other cities and states, almost all of them COVID-specific measures with built-in expiration dates. This August, though, New York City became the first city to make its 15% delivery fee cap permanent. And last week, the city passed an unprecedented package of legislation specifically addressing worker conditions and for delivery couriers. The big three delivery apps, formerly a big four, Postmates was acquired by Uber in 2020 December, each of which is valued at many billions of dollars, have frequently joined forces to push back against such attempts at regulation and have already filed a suit against New York City. Moe Tachik, a former journalist who now works on delivery app regulation, thinks that the apps may be fighting a losing battle. A senior fellow at the antitrust think tank, the American Economic Liberties Project, and the founder of the AELP-funded Protect Our Restaurants, Tachik is studying the impact of delivery apps since early in the pandemic when her husband, a chef, was struggling to keep a restaurant afloat. I spoke with her recently about why regulation has been so long in coming and whether a better food delivery model is possible. Our conversation has been edited for length and clarity. What put delivery apps on your radar? In March of last year, I was working with the American Economic Liberties Project and meanwhile trying to do whatever I could to help my husband, who's the chef at an Italian restaurant in DC. I was concerned that a lot of his workers would not qualify for unemployment, so we were putting our heads together to figure out how we were going to change his business model to be something capable of generating revenue during the pandemic. Delivery was one of the first things we thought of, and his general manager at the time said, well, you know, the minimum commission is going to be 30% for all of the delivery apps. The idea that they would be extracting 30% from every transaction was just unthinkable to me. And I knew immediately, oh, that's not cool. It's unsustainable for anybody, and it's going to kill restaurants. They couldn't have arrived at that number in a good faith way. And indeed, as I began to probe the history of the delivery app sector, the 30% commission really only shows up when Uber Eats entered the market. And when they enter a market, suddenly DoorDash and Grubhub are raising the commissions too. We actually have emails that certain restaurants have gotten that say, as you are aware, the market rate for online mobile delivery ordering is now 30%, and in accordance with that, we will be raising your fees. That's not how competition is supposed to work, right? We're taught that if there's more competition, it drives costs down and quality up. And what you are describing sounds like the opposite. In the world of Silicon Valley finance, you have people who all know one another. They all work together. They're all in the same bed together, sleeping together. You have companies with similar investors, take DoorDash and Uber Eats. In early 2020, SoftBank, which is a major investor in both of them, was trying to arrange a merger of those two companies. In a lot of cases, you don't actually have any legitimate competition because you're creating de facto collusion. when there are so few competitors in a market, it's pretty easy to kind of just wink and nod. You see that with wages too. People who've been driving delivery for a long time will always tell you about those early days with Postmates and how much money they made. It was like $30 an hour. But by 2018, 2019, everyone who was driving for these apps was starting to wonder if they could sustain it. What a lot of drivers have told us is that at that point, there were a lot of incentives for them to commit to regular schedules, to show up at regular times, to the point that they would quit whatever their day job was, and then that money goes away. It feels like there's the question of whether these delivery companies are being predatory toward restaurants and how to regulate that. And then there's a matter of delivery workers and their safety and their quality of life. Are the two actually separate, or are they the same issue? They are the same issue. I don't know if you saw it, but there was this viral post on newsletter called Margins, where this guy was talking about his friend who owns a pizza restaurant, and they screwed Doordash with this complicated scheme. I remember that. Doordash posted the restaurant's menu online without permission, and the restaurant owner noticed their prices were lower than his actual menu. So he just ordered his own pizza back to himself dozens of times and took Doordash's money. In the comments section on that post, I saw a post from a gentleman named Colin Wallace who was really hyped up. He says, "I'm reading it now. I was the former head of innovation at Grubhub, so I have seen the truth behind many of these claims firsthand. Sadly, I invented a lot of the food delivery technologies that are now being used for evil. COVID-19 is exposing the fact that delivery platforms are not actually in the business of delivery, they are in the business of finance. In many ways, they are like payday lenders for restaurants and drivers. They give you the sensation of cash flow, but at the expense of your long-term future and financial stability. Once you take out this loan, you will never pay it back, and it will ultimately kill your business." It goes on. Colin had the startup that he founded in college, and Grubhub bought him out in 2011, 2012. He ended up going to Stanford for business school. He was a year behind the Doordash CEO Tony Zhu's class. I told Tony, "Why would you want to get into the delivery business? Grubhub has this pretty locked down." What I didn't understand was the impact of zero interest rates. Basically, there's all this money sloshing around, and these venture capital funds need somewhere to put it. They're in the business of trying to make monopolies, and they will throw a lot of money at that. And in an environment of minimal, completely defunded, completely defanged, completely ineffectual antitrust enforcement, the Obama FTC was unbelievable, ineffectual, and it's not the first FTC that has been. They understood that there were all kinds of potential opportunities if they could just monopolize that customer base. My understanding is that the promise of these money-losing venture-funded companies is that they will eventually become profitable once they capture a sufficient share of the market. And right now, the delivery companies dominate the market, but they still can't seem to close to profitability. Right. They don't know how to get out of that business model. They invented how to climb out of that hole without potentially yielding market share. One of our Protect Our Restaurant members owns a restaurant in Iowa City, and they started a co-op with 17 other restaurants. It's a delivery service that operates just on a local basis. He set up little franchises of his model in other cities. It's not easy to get off the ground, but it makes a lot more sense because the Doordash model is just not run for the benefit of the restaurant or even with the restaurant's operations in mind. There are a lot of ways that the whole thing could be improved if these were just locally run businesses, a restaurant coalition or a city department of tourism or something like that operating the marketplace. Those are groups that have the interests of the local dining community and the community at large in mind. The whole operation of massive decentralized delivery apps, it doesn't need to exist. There doesn't need to be someone 1,000 miles away pushing a button that makes a guy go pick up food from a restaurant 3 blocks away from me and then